In today's aviation news recap, a startup airline has purchased an Airbus A380 second-hand. There's developments on the 737-7, part of the MAX series, and Australian airline Bonza is announcing a new route. But let me begin with no doubt what is going to be the feature story, like I always say, that being startup Global Airlines announcing that they've purchased an Airbus A380. According to the airline, the first aircraft acquired, despite claims of an acquisition in 2023, is an ex-China Southern A380, which was known as MSN 120. Based on data, this was previously registered as B-6140 with China Southern and stored at the end of 2022 after a first delivery some 9 years prior in 2013. We know that China Southern removed their A380s after much deliberation during the global pandemic. The aircraft is currently in storage in California, where of course warm weather is preferred for storing aircraft for extended periods. Word on how the aircraft will be transported towards the United Kingdom is unclear, obviously in the air, but when and how that takes place remains to be seen. Before Global Airlines has launched its attempts to enter the industry, the second-hand market for the A380 was zero, so it was a pretty safe assumption that these aircraft would never fly again. Those analysts that are critical of the startup would also argue that interest in the A380 remains zero, as this airline will never get off the ground for many reasons, and I'll get onto those shortly. But who are Global Airlines? They're a British startup hoping to launch scheduled passenger services in 2024. However, it is now said it will miss its initial expectation of a mid-2024 launch, but they still want to be able to be flying by year's end. The carrier wants to fly, at least initially, with the A380 exclusively. Global Airlines also hopes to fly to key markets worldwide, but at the moment it focuses on Los Angeles and New York to form ideally part of the initial route map, using London Gatwick as a home. However, now the startup may look to charter services to actually get them in the air. The company has been very confident that its business model of offering low fares is structurally sound, and it will have no problem filling a 500-plus seater plane that we know legacy and well-established airlines have struggled to fill for decades. And why at times the A380 struggled to sell. With ambitious business plans do come notable criticisms by analysts and general onlookers, which you'd argue is fair, but the thing is, do be careful if you broadcast those criticisms based on analysts and general onlookers, because you will receive a pretty lengthy email from one of their executives, but that totally doesn't relate to me. The overall criticisms relate to concerns surrounding the aircraft and overall operation, with a general lack of understanding of the challenges that are present. Those present challenges include securing an air operator certificate, getting slots into not forgetting highly expensive but also restrictive airports, configuring aircraft that are not fit to fly, doing significant cabin updates which are going to cost an abundance of money, and that isn't factoring in significant other expenses, actually trying to turn a profit, getting people on board, hiring staff. Look, the list can go on, and generally analysts have a view that this startup doesn't stand much of a chance. It has made several announcements. We know last year they signed a partnership with HiFly to leverage their experience in helping speed up the A380's entry into service program, but we'll have to see how this all pans out and how much longer this startup can truly go on. Bonza has announced a new route from its base on the Sunshine Coast through to Launceston in Tasmania, with commencement from the 29th of March, providing more ultra-low-cost fares. Service is operating on Monday and Friday with the 737 MAX. Additionally, it'll mark the 12th route from their home base on the Sunshine Coast and the second route from Launceston. Bonza is also celebrating 1 year of flying in Australian skies. It said it carried more than 750,000 passengers, which is a very essential milestone for the low-cost company. These 750,000 customers were transported across destinations right around Australia, notably aligning with Bonza's mission of serving either underserved or underserved markets and bringing low-cost fares to these markets that are that are seeing people priced out of flying. Tim Jordan, the airline's CEO, said they've already made considerable strides in achieving their goals. They say that they can save domestic travellers an additional $250 million in 2024 alone, which is on top of a predicted $125 million of savings in the first year in the skies. Bonza does not want to compete directly with Qantas, but what it wants to do is provide general competition to the Australian aviation sector, giving customers a little bit more food for thought when considering their next holiday or where they're going to travel, and they hope these low-cost prices are going to help turn people's heads, and thus far you'd argue they have been. It is now about breaking even and moving forward in a sustainable manner, not having to rely on aircraft coming over from Flair or other partners, and building a more solid foundation within Australia. On to the final story, and a rather big one. A controversial yet critical part of the 737-7 certification puzzle has received another update. At the beginning of last week, Boeing withdrew a request for a safety exemption. If Boeing had secured the safety exemption, it would have likely been able to speed up certification of the Dash 7, which is the smallest member of the MAX family. However, this safety exemption had long been debated and also criticised, as the belief was that a safety exemption for an already under-fire series and plane maker is not something that would have, say, gone down all that well, and it certainly doesn't take very long to see what I'm talking about with relation to this. These concerns were also only highlighted following a door blowout incident on an Alaska Airlines 737-9 that grounded 171 planes for a multi-week period. Additionally, after this blowout, new concerns emerged over the plane maker's production practices, thus leading to, you guessed it, more pressure. The safety exemption relates to the anti-icing system specifically. At the time of this being identified, regulators sent forward instructions to other operators of MAX variants, which were said to be affected. But obviously then, much focus was placed on the uncertified Dash 7. Certification for the Dash 7 and its uncertified counterpart, the Dash 10, has largely remained unclear in the last 12 months, if I'm being completely honest. The aircraft manufacturer, you may recall, previously would publish guidance on when they would expect the planes to be certified. However, after multiple missed windows, it became very apparent that identifying when they wanted such a variant approved and then that not eventuating only had negative repercussions and was hampering customers' forecasts and also the public's view of the variant. With removing a safety exemption request for the 737-7 certification, the expectation is that the EIS will be pushed even further back than it already was. These new predictions usher concern then for the larger 737-10, which for some time was actually considered the more complex variant to be certified. Largest customer to be impacted by this is Southwest, but they have said that they're willing to wait for the plane to be right, whether that is in 2027 and or later. They have aircraft that can cover, from their response at least, that they can switch out orders for the Dash 7 to certified aircraft, and therefore they're not necessarily losing capacity, but maybe more so just losing the ideal aircraft that they say would want to have within their operation, so they can retire some of their older 737 NGs. That is going to conclude today's aviation news recap. If you have any thoughts on the topics covered in today's video, you're more than welcome to drop them down below in the comments. Thank you so much for your support here on the channel. As always, I do really appreciate it. Take care, do be safe, and I will indeed see you next time for more coverage on the aviation industry.